Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Let him call me whatever he wants to call me. Let him say whatever he wants to say. He will not stop me. He cannot cause me to shut down. That's what they would like to do. They want me to run away. They want me to stop talking. They want me to be quiet. But he can't do that to me. I won't stand for it.
And not only did you have that, you know, the right came after you, but you had even the leadership of the Democratic Party, Nancy Pelosi, issuing a statement criticizing you. And this is Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader of the Senate on Monday.
I strongly disagree with those who advocate harassing folks if they don't agree with you. If you disagree with a politician, organize your fellow citizens to action and vote them out of office. But no one should call for the harassment of political opponents. That's not right. That's not American.
Were you surprised to have the leadership of your own party come out and essentially call you un-American?
Well, you know, I was surprised that Chuck Schumer, reached into the other house to do that. I've not quite seen that done before, but one of the things I recognize being an elected official is in the final analysis, leadership like Chuck Schumer's will do anything that they think is necessary to protect their leadership. And so what I have to do is not focus on them. I've got to keep the focus on the children and the fact that this administration is endangering children in the worst kind of way. We have children that spread all across this country in detention centers, basically in cages, in jails, separated from their parents. We have parents who may have been deported and their children are here in the United States somewhere. And then they talk about how these detention centers have volunteers that are doing what? Are they taking these children away? Are they allowing people to have access to these children in the most unusual way without vetting them, without knowing who they are? We want these children reconnected. I'm not going to let them get me off of that path of talking about that. I'm going to continue, as many others in the Congress are doing, going to jail for. We've got to stand up for the children.
It is Monday, the 2nd of July of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays, folks. That's right, it was another one of those weekends, wasn't it? Oh my. Well, the tragic news of this guy going into, stabbing 9 people, most of them kids, at a 3-year-old's birthday party in Boise, Idaho, at a housing complex that mostly had refugees. Now, we found out this is a 30-year-old man who had been kicked out of the facility. He had been there temporarily as a resident, and he decided to take his rage out on little refugee kids because, well, this is the world we live in. We had a guy pull a gun out on peaceful protesters. What were they protesting? Yeah, the caging of babies. and a Trump supporter, didn't like the way the discussion was going and pulled out his gun, made everybody drop to the ground. Unbelievable. This is the world we live in. So when they talk about, the lack of civility, yeah, well, when the Tea Party, now the Freedom Caucus, showed up at Obama rallies with guns, you want to talk to us about civility? You want to call Maxine Waters un-American? Please. Poor Chuck Schumer. I guess he just doesn't get it. You didn't listen to the black women who warned everybody about Trump. Said exactly what he was going to do. In fact, I remember black women were made fun of. And they were warned. All of them were warned. Don't do it. Don't do that. And look what happened. So Chuck, don't be going after Maxine. Okay? It looks like socialism has come to our shores. First the Bronx. Oh my God, she's a socialist. Did you see Hannity's complaint, his little wine fest? About all the things that she's going to try to push through, like, help for seniors, try to stop, money from going into campaigns that you can't track. All these really bad things that Hannity thinks are bad that his base are going to hate. Health care for seniors, all of that, because it's socialist. It's a liberal. It's a leftist. And they're going after her like, she's not really a poor, destitute person. She's actually has a house. She's got a refrigerator. How can she call herself a socialist? She has a refrigerator. Where do they come up with this BS? It's like, if you're a liberal, you can't have money. You're a liberal. You're a hypocrite if you got money. What? We never said people shouldn't be able to, live in the free enterprise system and, this is how we live, right? No. The idea is that everybody should at least have the same opportunities to, make what they want. And I think that's really where it gets down to, is because it's the difference between need and want. I think at some point, most of us on our side, not all, but you know what I mean, is that our needs are not tied to what we want. And their needs are completely tied to what they want. There's no difference. What they want, what they need are absolutely the same. And that is to get more for them. And equality means they've given up something. Rather than someone, all boats rising, right? Nope. They're coming down. It's not the tide rising, it's the tide falling. And that is the mindset that they have. So now socialists are going to come and kill you in your sleep. For the first time in Mexico's history, a leftist won their presidency. Well, so far. Because I hate to be a cynic, but those people usually get killed rather quickly. Happens here. Happened here a few times. Well, quickly. Depends on your idea of quickly. In relative terms. You know what I mean. What's on the rest? What's on the rest of the menu today? Well, we've curated a show for you, and we had to, just stop it. And, there's the obvious stories out there, and I try not to hit the obvious too much. So let's look at what else we have. Well, of course, Maxine explained exactly why Chuck Schumer went after her and called her un-Americans, because he wants to keep his leadership position. And what was he? A senator attacking a U.S. representative? What's up with that? Un-American. They went after Shirley Sherrod for the same reason, because she's black. And black women should be marginalized. And we do so at our peril. Damn it. Well, the Trump State Department attacked the United Nations for fighting racism, and why wouldn't they? Trump's steel tariffs may send another American motorcycle company overseas. There's another one. I thought all of our motorcycle companies were gone. There's another one. Yep. And a Missouri appeals court tosses the $55 million Johnson & Johnson talc-powder verdict. Well, we'll look into that. After the break, we'll then move to the chef's table where the U.S. ambassador to Estonia resigned in protest over Trump's disgraceful treatment of America's European allies. Just on Friday, too. And a Unite the Right organizer is awarded a cool $5 after suing a Black Lives Matter activist who called him a crybaby. Wow. Them's fighting words, ain't it? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the chat room link at the rightish of the page, and that is monitored by our roaring girl, Kelly Lincoln. And if you look at the leftish side of the page at netrootsradio.com from the chat room link, you'll notice the contribute donate buttons. I need to warn you, they are in a bit of flux right now. The Patreon button is still working, though it will not at real soon. And the PayPal, we're in the process of moving, and unfortunately, I know that with the PayPal, everything has to be started anew. So we'll be making entreaties for folks to maybe renew that when you've been doing that on a regular basis. And on the Patreon, we're going to have to probably do the same. And so bear with us. We apologize, but, we sort of thought that this would happen and tried to warn you a bit. But you can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. I'm supposed to take care of the Facebook, but I let Facebook take care of itself. You could follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And I also post the show notes and links for the show on my Daily Co's Diary. And I'm on Daily Co's as Justice Putnam. Do follow West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy at Cookbook West on Twitter. And yeah, West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is on Facebook too. I had to start that because there's something going on with Facebook and all sorts of different platforms and Spreaker and all that. Speaking of which, podcasts of the show can be found by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIns, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, well, when I mentioned what a weekend, I only mention that because then it's like Monday and even more stuff starts happening. Now, we know exactly why Trump has been on such a rage. It's because, yes, Mueller is getting so close. In fact, there is some speculation that maybe Mueller may even have to speed up this whole process somewhat because of the rapidity in which Trump and crew are trying to push through certain agenda items that might be detrimental to the United States of America and its security. Isn't that weird? So, but that's probably just purely speculation in this reporter's opinion, but I don't know. I see it coming. It looks like Michael Cohen is trying to put the screws to Donald, but I also think that he's trolling for a pardon. I will tell them what they want to hear unless you give me a pardon. And I think that's perfectly loud and clear, too. Yep. Oh, and then Mexico, the first leftist. Oh, my God. The Bronx, Mexico. Yeah, leftist to the left of me. Leftist to the right of me. Wow. What's in the middle? I think Eisenhower. Yeah, we're so far left. I hate these questions that somebody like a Tammy Duckworth gets asked. Why is the Democratic Party going so left? No, everybody else is going very right. So right that Nazis are fine people now, aren't they? They're even running as Republicans with their funny little Illinois Nazi hats. Bundes this, baby. Okay, well, I'll tell you, we're going to fight Nazis at the ballot box. Okay? And we'll show these little Nazis who's boss. That's right. Multicultural America, who really wants everybody to be equal, have due process for all. What's wrong with that? Socialist, apparently. All right, well, let's get in with the stories that we're going to attend to today. Well, let's get on to this story about Trump's State Department. Attacks the UN for fighting racism. Of course they would, because this is what Trump does. And this is by Oliver Willis out of Share Blue Media. A senior State Department official installed by Trump slammed the United Nations for opposing racism and is working to undermine the organization's efforts to do so. CNN obtained documents authored by Andrew Veprick, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Refugees and Migration. What is it that these dictators have against refugees? Oh, I forgot. They make them. And the reason they make them is because they need somebody to kill. Ultimately, that's what the motive is. It's a cleansing, apparently. I see where Trump's gambit is. He believes in this eugenic BS that he's from some sort of Nordic background and that's a superior race. I'm not slamming the Nordic and the that, but I'm just saying that Trump. All you have to do to see whether a particular racial profile is superior is to look at the individuals of that profile, and Trump certainly isn't the best and the brightest now, is he? Even physically, 239 pounds. Give me an effing break. Okay, well, let's get out of the superficial and get into the meat of the article. In the papers, Veprick disputes the notion that world leaders have a duty to condemn hate speech and incitement of racial hatred. Everybody has a right to hate, because that's our God-given right as a Christian American, don't you know? For years, the UN Human Rights Council has adopted a resolution addressing the, quote, incompatibility between democracy and racism, end quote. But now, Veprick, empowered by Trump, has offered an amendment to the resolution, watering down its moral stance against bigotry. He writes that the duty to condemn racism, as stated by the United Nations, goes too far. Let me repeat. The duty to condemn racism is going too far. Veprick adds, our public figures cannot be obliged to police every intolerant thought. Not every, but make a stance, you twit. Ugh. Veprick's argument sounds tailor-made to appease Trump, who has been repeatedly chastised for supporting hate. Trump has a history of anti-black comments. He called Mexicans rapists, and he pushed for the ban on travel to America for Muslims at every turn. His administration has embraced the more hateful option, putting it at odds with other prominent governments around the world. Trump was even directly criticized by British Prime Minister Theresa May after he promoted videos from an anti-Muslim hate group. Echoing Trump, Veprick railed against the UN policy for stating clearly the evils of xenophobia. Rob Bershinsky, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Human Rights under President Barack Obama, told CNN that VEPREC is trying to reduce the power of the resolution as relates to racism in politics. The episode is just one more example of Trump and his underlings turning away from America's unique role in advocating for global good and instead making excuses for racism and bigotry. Here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, is an article out of Think Progress by Rebecca Entralgo. Well, just days after Harley Davidson made a similar move, another American motorcycle company is looking to go overseas. Minnesota-based motorcycle company Polaris Industries has announced that, like its larger rival Harley Davidson, it's considering moving some of its production overseas as a result of Europe's retaliatory tariffs. Nothing is definitive. Polaris spokeswoman Jess Rogers told the AP, "We're looking at a range of mitigation plans." Oh, so that's a nice way of putting it. "We're definitely seeing an increase in costs, but failed to say by how much." The company currently employs about 650 people at its Iowa plant. Now, news that Polaris could send production from Iowa to Poland? That's nice. I like the consonants of that. Poland, Polaris, Poland. Comes just days after Harley Davidson acknowledged that production of their bikes sold in Europe has become too costly due to retaliatory tariffs and said they will be relocating some of its American production overseas. Oh, the company estimates costs related to the tariffs to come out about $30 million to $45 million. Now, this is Harley. For the rest of 2018, and about $90 million to $100 million annually. The European market accounts for roughly 16% of Harley sales. In the past, Trump has thanked Harley Davidson executives for building things in America. Yeah, well, anytime you get a thanks from Trump, expect a knife in the back, because that's how he does business. Okay, ironically, Trump's actions are directly harming the company he once praised. Really? Ironically? I think he's shown a track record for this. As recently as May, Harley Davidson has been forced to move some U.S.-based manufacturing jobs overseas to India and Thailand. Even more ironic is how Trump has attacked Harley Davidson in recent days for relocating due to his own actions. A Harley Davidson should never be built in another country, never, Trump tweeted last week. Their employees and customers are already very angry at them. If they move, watch, it will be the beginning of the end. They surrendered. They quit. The aura will be gone, and they will be taxed like never before. Yeah, you know what? I don't think that you're the one that gets to tax people, because that's using the IRS as a legal arm to go after your enemies. We went through all this before. Didn't Roger Stone explain it to you? Okay, finishing up here in the Bistro Cafe is an article out of Reuters, reporting by Tina Bellin and editing by David Gregorio and Bill Burkrot. A Missouri appeals court on Friday threw out a $55 million verdict against Johnson & Johnson in a lawsuit by a woman who claimed she developed ovarian cancer after using talc-based products, including Johnson & Johnson's baby powder, citing a U.S. Supreme Court ruling on where such cases can be brought. This is interesting because right now it doesn't seem that they're disputing the science that caused this verdict to be adjudicated in the first place, but the proper venue in which, the proper jurisdiction in which the case can be brought. So they're going to throw out the whole thing. Well, South Dakota resident Gloria Ristasunt had been awarded $5 million in compensatory damages and $50 million in punitive damages in the 2016 verdict. She alleged that her decades-long use of Johnson & Johnson talc-based products for feminine hygiene caused her cancer, and that the company had failed to warn consumers about the risks. Johnson & Johnson denied the allegations, saying decades of testing have shown its cosmetic talc-based products to be safe. And they ought to know because they killed a lot of animals, proving how safe it is, in this reporter's opinion. So after a while, I think that they decided, well, let's test this on humans and see if it kills, how many it kills of them. And there's always, a good number to die. And then at some point it gets too high, and then you go, well, that's a bad number. The healthcare conglomerate is battling some 9,000 cases claiming its talc-based products cause ovarian cancer, and in some other cases, mesothelioma, a rare cancer closely linked to asbestos exposure, amid allegations that products were contaminated with asbestos fibers. Johnson & Johnson has said its talc products do not contain asbestos or cause any form of cancer. Well, there's no absolutes in this universe, let's be clear. The unanimous 3-judge panel of the Missouri Court of Appeals in the Eastern District, in overturning the verdict, did not rule on the merits of the allegations. Instead, the verdict could not stand following a 2017 U.S. Supreme Court decision that limits where companies can be sued for personal injuries. Oh, well, Johnson & Johnson doesn't have any business in South Dakota. They just sell their products there. Well, the High Court ruled that state courts cannot hear claims against companies that are not based in the state or when the alleged injuries did not occur there. Johnson & Johnson is based in New Jersey, and Ristasunt exclusively purchased and used the company's talc products in South Dakota and Minnesota. That's a nice way of getting around it. You sell your products all over the place, but you can't be sued there because they have to live in your state. Yeah. Well, Ristasunt's case was more than 60 related talc lawsuits consolidated in Missouri State Court, where juries have a reputation for issuing high-paying verdicts. But only one of those cases involved a woman from Missouri, leading many of the cases to be tossed on jurisdictional grounds. During the appeals process, Ristasunt asked the court for permission to present additional evidence tying Johnson & Johnson to Missouri. But the judges on Friday rejected her request, saying she had ample opportunity to present such evidence over the past 2 years. Unbelievable. Okay, let's get to our break, and we'll come back and go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. The animal kingdom is crowded with species that use sound, growls and bellows and roars, to signal size. Dogs do it. Red deer do it. Koalas do it. And now we can add humans to that list. Because a new study suggests we can size up other people by the sound of their roar alone. First, researchers took the circumference of 61 men's and women's biceps, measured their grip strength and their height. Then, they told them to let loose a roar.
I'd probably describe it as the most hellish version of Groundhog Day that you can think of.
Jordan Rain, a behavioral ethologist at the University of Sussex.
If you just imagine 30 actors in training coming into a small room one after another and roaring at you, yeah, it was an experience, that's for sure.
His team then played those roars back to a separate group of male and female listeners who'd also been measured for strength and size. They found that men correctly rated other men as substantially stronger than them 90% of the time, based on roar alone. Men did tend to underestimate women's strength by the sound of their roars, and women overestimated men's strength. But in general, roaring like a wild animal, it seemed like a pretty accurate way to telegraph body size and strength. The researchers also found that regular shouting, "That's enough! I'm coming for you!" did not seem to have the same effect as a roar.
So what the roaring is actually doing is having this exaggerative effect on strength, which is very similar to the adaptations that non-human mammals possess that allow them to exaggerate their strength when they roar as well.
The full results and more roars are in the journal iScience. The finding could have practical, real-world applications, too. For example, soldiers have roared in battle throughout history to attempt to intimidate the enemy.
And the U.S. National Park Service actually recommends roaring as a defense strategy against bears.
Just hope that the bear's hearing is better than their eyesight. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Pools, water parks, and other recreational water venues are popular places to relax and stay cool, but they can be sources of serious illness. Since 2000, nearly 500 outbreaks have been reported at recreational water venues in the U.S., resulting in over 27,000 illnesses and 8 deaths. Most were caused by parasites, bacteria, viruses, or certain chemicals in the water. Parents with young children who have diarrhea should not allow their children to swim or play in the water. In addition, bathers should check the inspection scores of pools and water parks and can conduct mini-inspections using test strips before getting in the water. A few simple precautions can allow you to share the fun, not the germs. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Freedom of expression is protected by the First Amendment to the Constitution. One benefit of freedom of expression is that it helps to maintain representative democracy. For example, individual citizens participate in running our country by electing their representatives to Congress and other government officials. Citizens can also participate in making decisions about government policies. To make wise choices, you need to have good information. Free expression does not guarantee complete or accurate information, but it increases the chances of getting such information. Another benefit of freedom of expression is that it helps to bring about peaceful social change. Freedom of expression allows you to try to influence public opinion by persuasion without feeling you have to resort to violence to make changes. Also, if you have the opportunity to express your opinions freely, you might be more willing to accept government decisions, even decisions you do not agree with. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
We will vote to confirm Justice Kennedy's successor this fall.
Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy's retirement is bad news for the climate.
For the people who live here, there's nothing to come home to. Burned to scrap and ash.
New wildfires hit Northern California and 5 other states. Federal judge dismisses San Francisco's climate liability lawsuit. Plus,
when we decide to take action, the world by default gets better.
Bright spots in the primaries as progressive climate hawks win upset victories.
All of that upset and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Nature is not a political game.
It is now, Governor Brown, and the bad guys just rolled Yahtzee. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, lots of concerns about whoever the replacement may be for Justice Anthony Kennedy, and, of course, concerns about the climate along with it.
Yep. Kennedy's retirement from the U.S. Supreme Court is an ominous development that could bring about sweeping changes to both U.S. environmental law and the federal government's authority to address climate change. So it's potentially bad not just for the nation, but for the planet and future generations because of the need to act on climate right now. Justice Kennedy's record was pretty positive overall on environmental protection. He was the crucial 5th vote in the landmark ruling Massachusetts versus EPA, which upheld the Environmental Protection Agency's authority to regulate the greenhouse gases that cause dangerous climate change. A more conservative Supreme Court could overhaul established public health protections like the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act and even the Endangered Species Act. And significant climate policy and pollution lawsuits are now headed to the U.S. Supreme Court, like President Obama's Clean Power Plan that set the first ever carbon emission standards for power plants. Bottom line, adding another anti-environment, anti-regulation, right-wing justice like Neil Gorsuch to the bench will likely push the court to further restrict the scope of federal authority and limit environmental justice.
You know, I wish I had a snarky comment here, but I really don't.
I don't blame you. Speaking of justice, a climate liability lawsuit against major oil companies that was brought by the cities of San Francisco and Oakland was dismissed by a federal judge this week. The cities were seeking damages to pay for the costs and impacts of rising sea levels. In his ruling, District Court Judge William Alsup called the dangers of climate change, quote, very real, and noted that the fossil fuel companies did not dispute that burning their products causes global warming. But he said that it is a global problem that requires a global solution beyond the court's power to provide, and said that Congress and the executive branch must solve it.
Oh, well, that should go very well.
So ExxonMobil, BP, and Chevron escaped blame for those public costs, but other ongoing climate liability lawsuits continue to wend their way through state and local courts.
So this is just one judge who turned down this suit. Other judges may see it completely differently?
That's correct.
Of course, if they do, those cases, I suspect, will go all the way to the Supreme Court, and then they'll die.
We'll just have to see.
Too cynical?
Meanwhile, 4 new wildfires have erupted in Northern California amid high winds and high temperatures, including one less than 20 miles away from the catastrophic and deadly wine country fires last fall that obliterated entire neighborhoods. The Pawnee fire has already destroyed homes and forced thousands to evacuate. It is Lake County, California's 4th major wildfire in just 4 years. A new study concludes that U.S. oil and gas drillers are leaking far more methane than previously estimated by the federal government, some 60% more. Led by the Environmental Defense Fund, the study, published in the journal Science, estimates that about $2 billion worth of natural gas is lost to leaks every year in the United States, enough to heat 10 million homes. Because methane is a powerful greenhouse gas, it has a big impact on climate change. But the good news, the authors say, is that most of the leakage can be stopped at relatively relatively low cost to industry. Finally, there is a bright spot of good news.
I'll take it.
Progressive climate hawk candidates scored upset victories in 2018 primary elections this week. In Utah, Navajo Kenneth Maryboy unseated incumbent Rebecca Benally for San Juan County Commissioner. Benally supported the Trump administration's gutting of the Bears Ears National Monument boundaries against the wishes of the majority of Navajo tribal members in the state.
And the voters tossed her out?
Yes, they did.
Good for them.
And in the New York primary, progressive candidate and climate hawk Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez won the Democratic nomination for House District 14 against longtime incumbent Democratic Representative Joe Crowley. Ocasio-Cortez calls for transitioning the nation to 100% renewable electricity by 2035.
Go Alexandria. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and please share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Hold your head up. Hold your head up. Hold your head up. Hold your head high. Hold your head up. Hold your head up. Hold your head up.
Get ready, America. Here we go to war. Generalissimo Trump, whose nom de guerre is El Donaldo, the mucho macho presidente of the USA, is personally directing the hostilities in this assault on, surprise, the USA. Well, not every American. He's specifically mounting a war on our country's poor people, though he euphemistically calls it a war of liberation. The purpose, he says, is to, quote, free poor families from food stamps, Medicaid, housing assistance, and America's other programs that alleviate poverty. Welfare, he snarls, as he and his militant lieutenants conduct ruthless slash-and-burn forays to defund and destroy such benefits. Their rationale is that eliminating anti-poverty assistance will not only save billions of tax dollars and reduce the federal budget deficit, but it'll also provide a moral incentive for poor people to get jobs and work their way up to prosperity, like El Donaldo and his billionaire buddies did. Actually, Trump inherited a real estate fortune from his daddy Fred, and he expanded it by relying on billions of dollars in government subsidies, tax breaks, and special favors. As for working, most poor people already have jobs, but the miserly pay of those jobs mire them in poverty and drudgery. Even more significant, the vicious, laissez-faire-land sense of moral superiority possessed by pampered political elites like Trump lead them to be intentionally cruel to the poor. This is Jim Hightower saying he, his cabinet of multimillionaires, and such coke-headed congressional ideologues as GOP House Speaker Paul Ryan and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell are so disdainful of the needy that they have a perverse impulse to punish them, as though being poor is not punishment enough. It's said that war is hell, but their war on the poor is truly satanic.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
And this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day workers at the Hershey candy plant in Hershey, Pennsylvania, sat down. CIO organizers for the new United Chocolate Workers Union reported that anywhere from 2,000 to 2,400 workers were on strike. Hershey was a company town where streets were named Chocolate and Coca Avenue. Housing was built for workers, and the company funded public education and transit service. But the company also sought to monitor and control workers' behavior on their off time and showed favoritism in hiring and wages. The Great Depression created dire conditions even in the sweetest place on earth. Hours and bonuses had been cut. Workers grew increasingly frustrated with production speed up and unpredictable work schedules, all while Hershey still drew handsome profits. The company initially raised wages after meeting with the union, but then laid off the organizers 3 months later. That's when the workers shut off their machines and occupied the plant. The company refused to negotiate unless the workers left. By April 7th, dairy farmers became incensed at the loss of income. They mobilized with anti-union company forces to storm the factory and drive the strikers out. Organizers had agreed to end the strike in order to resume negotiations and avert violence. But the anti-union forces attacked the sit-downers with bats, whips, clubs, and hammers. 3 CIO organizers were singled out and severely beaten. Governor George Earle condemned the attack and blamed the county sheriff for suppressing labor rather than preventing mob rule. The strike was smashed. Attempts to install a company union failed soon after. Hershey would be one of the first candy companies to be organized when the Bakery, Confectionery, Tobacco Workers, and Grain Millers International Union won recognition 2 years later. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. And we always begin with weather from around the world. And we begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 54 degrees. We're going to be much cooler than we were yesterday and the weekend. We're only going to go up to 81 degrees today. Of course, we were in the mid-90s, low to mid-90s over the weekend. Oh, we had our International Rooster Crow Contest and Parade, the 65th Annual International Rooster Crow Competition and Parade. Yes, and it was quite a success, and I can't tell you who won because I admit I didn't go to the actual rooster crow, and they also have a human crow as well. The human crow isn't as old as the actual rooster crow, but they are both very popular events. So popular, I decided that I would, I admit I watched some of the World Cup instead, which will be happening today as well, and tomorrow. And then pretty soon, like around Bastille Day, we're going to have the Tour de France. Yeah, bicycle race. All over the countryside of France and other countries, adjoining countries too. I can't remember where the route's going this year, but we'll find out. And yes, so we will be much cooler today, and we are very, very dry. Winds are currently out of the southwest about 1 to 2 miles per hour. They will, of course, increase to 5 to 10 miles per hour, but out of the northwest, and will continue out of the northwest overnight. We're looking at a low of around 52 degrees, a little chillier, and then a high tomorrow of around 85 degrees. Dry conditions will continue. Grass pollen remains high. Air quality index is actually good at 9 parts per million, but the daytime UV index remains very high at 9, which is very high. So take care. High pressure dominates at 30.09 inches. Visibility is only at 8 miles right now, but that's going to clear up. And relative humidity, as I said, very dry. We're at 62%. And that is weather from around here in the Rogue River area of Southern Oregon. So weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. All right. London is 82 degrees and sunny. Paris is 85 and sunny, and they do have a heat advisory. It's going to get even warmer or hotter, depending on how you feel in Paris, so be careful there. Rome is 86 degrees and fair. Kiev is 59 and partly cloudy. Kabul is 85 degrees and fair, but with heavy winds. Hong Kong is 81 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 80 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 53 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 56 and cloudy with a small craft advisory, by the way, on the bay and offshore as well. And it looks like, oh my God, New York is 87 degrees Fahrenheit when you have an excessive heat warning, because it looks like you're going to go up to 95 or even hotter. And lows will be in the mid-upper 70s. So take care in New York. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. All right, first offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, is an article out of Share Blue Media by Carolyn Orr. Well, it looks like Trump has lost another career diplomat because of Trump's own disregard, a reckless disregard, I might add, for diplomacy. The U.S. ambassador to Estonia resigned on Friday to protest Trump's disgraceful treatment of America's European allies, joining a growing list of diplomats who have quit their posts in disgust over the Trump presidency. James Melville. Wow. Really? James Melville? Who has served as a diplomat for over 3 decades and as America's ambassador to Estonia since 2015, announced his resignation in a private Facebook post obtained by Foreign Policy magazine. Although Melville was already considering retiring soon, he said Trump's recent remarks about the European Union and disregard for long-standing alliances had convinced him that it was time to leave. For the president to say the EU was set up to take advantage of the United States to attack our piggy bank, or that NATO is as bad as NAFTA, is not only factually wrong, but proves to me that it is time to go, he said, or wrote in the Facebook post. Melville's resignation comes less than 2 weeks before this year's NATO summit in Brussels, where Trump will meet with more than 24 U.S. allies to discuss global threats. I think Trump will be discussing the global threats that NATO poses to the United States and his good friends. Oh, did I mention Trump is now the United States? Not we the people. He the Trump. All right. But in the weeks leading up to the summit, Trump has repeatedly made statements that suggest he's more interested in dismantling international alliances and strengthening them because Vlad told him so. Everybody knows that. Now Trump is threatening to pull the U.S. out of the World Trade Organization, a move that would throw global trade into wild disarray, officials said. And it's also been reported that Trump had tried to bribe French President Emmanuel Macron to leave the EU by offering a bilateral trade deal with France if it pulled out of the EU. And also this month, Trump trashed America's allies of the G7 and launched a trade war with the EU and Canada, then withdrew from the UN Human Rights Council. I don't know. Looks like the playbook that Vlad wanted. You may think that I'm on a Russian jag, but the evidence is the evidence. Now, it comes also after a series of widely criticized decisions to renege on major multilateral commitments like the Iran nuclear deal and the Paris Climate Accord. Meanwhile, Trump continues to praise dictators like Kim Jong-un and cozy up to adversaries like, Carol Lenore says it, Russia. This behavior is incompatible with diplomacy, Melville wrote, leading him to conclude that the honorable course is to resign from his post as U.S. ambassador. I don't know. I would have probably thrown a literal monkey wrench into the works, not to mess up the State Department, mind you. There's not much left of the State Department to mess up. It's been dismantled so terribly. But I don't know. A monkey wrench somewhere along the lines might be in order here. Well, Melville continues, I leave willingly and with deep gratitude for being able to serve my nation with integrity for many years and with great confidence that America, which is and always has been great, will someday return to being right, he added. A senior State Department official told Foreign Policy that Melville's departure is a sign of growing frustration with Trump among career diplomats. I think that happened from the very beginning, actually. And this official expressed concern that more resignations will follow. Well, a lot of resignations have proceeded, by the way. About 60% of top-ranking career diplomats have fled the agency since Trump took office, and many more critical positions remain vacant since Trump has failed to fill them. In late March, more than 200 retired career diplomats signed a letter sounding the alarm about the corrosion of the State Department, warning that the Trump administration's neglect of the institution has crippled its capacity. All of this has left America in a weakened and more isolated position on the global stage, which, incidentally, Carol Lenore writes, is exactly how Vladimir Putin would like us to be.
Danser maintenant sous l'été, les pieds nus dans le sable. Danser maintenant et jeter vos ennuis dans les vagues qui dansent.
Elizabeth Pretza from Alternate brings us this last offering here at the Chef's Table on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A judge in Charlottesville on Friday awarded avowed white nationalist Jason Kessler $5 after determining an activist violated Virginia's anti-dueling statute by yelling curse words at him. Yeah, them fighting words. What kind of fighting words did she yell? Well, we'll find out, won't we? Kessler sued Donna Gasapo, a Richmond-based activist affiliated with Black Lives Matter, for $500 after she yelled, F you, asshole, crybaby Kessler, at him on March 16th. Kessler said he encountered Gasapo while he was reporting on the trial of DeAndre Harris, a black man brutally beaten during the Charlottesville rally who was later acquitted on charges of assaulting a white supremacist. Remember that? The guy was charged with assaulting the stick of the white supremacist that was beating the crap out of him with it. Because, property and all. So, someone in our community was murdered, Gasapo said. White supremacists stormed into our city. It doesn't set well with me. Gasapo never denied Kessler's allegation, but her lawyer, Pam Starcia, argued her statements were protected by the First Amendment. Her lawyer also refuted Kessler's claim he suffered damages as a result of Gasapo's language and said that, as a public figure, there were higher standards for proving malice in someone's words. Judge Robert H. Downer, Jr. agreed that Kessler is a public figure, but ruled Gasapo's language did violate the statute. Still, he only awarded the white nationalist $5 of his $500 lawsuit because the judge did not believe Kessler was damaged by her words. Starcia said she's comforted by the judge's determination that Kessler is a public figure, but added she and Gasapo are discussing their options and an appeal is possible. I think we should all be very concerned about what this ruling means in terms of opening up other frivolous harassment suits against members of our community who are expressing their opinions and their very real feelings of frustration, which we believe are protected by the First Amendment. Well, apparently crybaby is fighting words now, isn't it? All right. Well, we're at the end of our broadcast period for the day, but Netroots Radio, of course, broadcasts on for breaking news. We'll visit with you tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, of course. Breaking news again all day throughout the day on Netroots Radio. Stay tuned, and we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.